Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this. This is episode 9 of Rovers Rambles, the first proper episode, I would say, of the 2026-27 season. It's been quite a while since we last did an episode, but we're back once again. As always, I'm joined by Jaimie. Good afternoon, Jaimie. It's a really hot one today, isn't it?
It is a boiling one, but yeah, good afternoon. Ready to get back into the swing of it.
Yeah, back to weekly. We will be from now on. Obviously, the season's in full flow already. We'll talk about the Peterborough game that happened on Saturday later on. We're also going to look forward to our first league game of the season away against York. But we're going to start with the goalkeeper situation. Of course, a lot has happened in that department over the last couple of weeks. Of course, we've had the incoming of Charlie Binns from Bath City, and we've had a departure in that department, Luke Southwood leaving for Blackpool. I think sensible business all round from Rovers in the goalkeeping department.
Yeah, Salford was one where it was just looking like as more and more time went on, it wasn't going to happen, because I think obviously the big kind of dilemma as we went was, is a team going to be ready to kind of give Salford what he wants? He's one of the biggest earners at the club. And if he was content to kind of sit around and he was content to kind of wait for that higher wage to come in, that higher offer to come in, there was a reality where we could have, I don't want to say get stuck with him, but almost in a way have no other choice but to keep him around.
Yeah.
So obviously we saw with the man we're going to talk about who's came in, we sent him out on loan with the idea that Southwood was probably sticking around to be the number 2. Obviously played so many minutes in pre-season, but the situation has changed. And I think it is the best thing for everyone involved. Obviously we've made it pretty clear over the course of this that we're 2 people who rate him a lot higher than most here.
Yeah, I think he just got unlucky. I think he was sort of an unfortunate victim of the situation in a way. Obviously, that's it's good what happened with Brad, and in no way is it his fault. Obviously, he's had the opportunity, he's taken it with both hands, and he is firmly our number 1 now. And I think Southwood, again, was just the victim in this. Obviously, that's football, it's what happens, but I think it makes sense if you can get rid of, because he was on a lot of money. I think it was $5,000 a week, wasn't it, that he was on? So
Yeah, I believe
I
so.
think he'll want to play football. Blackpool have come in for him, and I think it's a sensible move all around. We can get rid of the wages. Southwood. Southwood.
Yeah,
I don't know
what.
I got Smallwood stuck in my head then for some reason.
Welcome back. It's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back. Yeah, I bet you've all missed us. Where were we? Yeah, Southwood can go and play football. So I think all around it's the right decision. And of course, from what I've seen of him, of course, we haven't seen much, but that Charlie Binns does look pretty good. And I think for now, obviously, he's going to be a number 2 to Brad Young, but he can be that sort of presence that can push Brad on, to try for better performances. Of course, he's played very well, but we want to see the best out of Brad, and hopefully Charlie can bring that. And then who knows? It could be a similar situation. Brad Young was in this situation this time last season, and look what's happened. Who knows? We could be talking about Charlie Binns being our number 1 by this time next season.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, when I was first watching Brad Young, I think the first game I saw with him was the Tottenham under-21s game. And I remember coming out after that and thinking, right, we need Southwood available as much as physically possible.
Yeah.
And that feels ridiculous to be saying now with how
you were cursing the international breaks, because that was like 4 weeks a year where Southwood was guaranteed to be away. You're thinking, oh my God, we got to play with Brad Young for at least 4 weeks of the season. And it's now turned out that he's firmly our number 1 and an absolutely fantastic goalkeeper. So it's funny how things work out.
Yeah, it's funny, yeah, when you give someone the run of games, give someone the trust. And obviously the idea is not to kind of gift that to Charlie Binns now, but it is a case where he's clearly being trusted enough that if the situation comes about, if something does go wrong, if something happens to Brad Young, we have him there who Steve Evans clearly has enough trust in to be able to come in and do a job. So I think all right. I mean, I'm not going to act like I've seen much of him, if anything, but if Steve trusts him, I trust him. That's kind of the general feeling I take with most of our transfers nowadays. And
yeah, I think that's sort of the general consensus with transfers for a lot of the fan base. If Steve sees the vision, then we see the vision. I saw him a little bit at that sort of open training session thing, and he looked pretty decent. Obviously, that's probably the least gauge you can get from watching a player live as to how they'll perform at all. Is probably that, then a pre-season game, and then actually watching them being competitive. but he looked pretty decent. He was making a few good saves. Obviously, it's a bit difficult because obviously we're playing small-sided games, so it's a bit difficult to tell how he would like command his area and things like that. But he looked like a decent shot stopper, and obviously there's more facets to being a goalkeeper. I would know, but it's from what I can tell, his shot stopping is good, which was obviously a good start, and then we just need to see what we can build from that. I think the fact that I don't think you mentioned it, but obviously the fact that Steve's recalled him, well, it seems from that loan to Malvern, obviously means that he's got faith in him, because I think if he saw it more as a one that can make an impact in the future, then he would have probably kept him at Malvern and tried to find a free agent or a cheap backup option to Brad. The fact that he has recalled him from Malvern, well, I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but I think it's pretty much like we know that he's going to be back. The fact that has happened shows that Steve sees something in Charlie, and I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, well, it shows two things. It shows, first of all, that Southwood's outgoing came as like a little bit of a surprise, that we've kind of gone back on our plans. But yeah, like you said, and like I said, it shows that there is a trust in him, because it would have been very easy to go out and find some sort of free agent, pick someone else out in the National League who's more experienced, and get them there, who would have been happy to just be back playing professional football, even if they're not playing regularly, to just be back in the fold. But we've not even, it doesn't seem like we've really explored that even. We're dead set on Charlie Binns as our number 2 now, if that's the situation we're in. So yeah, it does show at least like a concrete level of trust in him, which is a positive if he is somebody who's going to be with us for quite a few years.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the decision's been made so quickly, like there wasn't any hesitation around it. It was straight. The moment Southwood goes, right, Charlie, you're back. You're going to be our number 2. And I think that shows that Steve obviously sees something in it. And I think it would have made sense if Southwood was going to stay for him to go on loan to Malvern. It's a relatively decent level of football. I think it's tier 7. I'm not 100% sure. I think they're in the same league as Yate. So
yes, I believe so,
a relatively decent level of football. And, we've seen it work before with players like Ollie Dewsbury and stuff. So it would have been good for his development. And obviously he's still young, so he would have had plenty of time to come back and make his mark in future seasons. But I think the fact that loan has immediately been cancelled, that there was no hesitation surrounding it whatsoever. Straight away, the decision was he's coming back, he's our number 2. There must be something about him.
Yeah, and in terms of the outgoing as well, like I touched on there, as much as we kind of think it's harsh, the reaction that he's got and kind of the perception that Southwood has got, when we're in a situation where we want to be pushing on, you want the spirits at the club to be as high as possible. And like I said, as much as it's harsh, to have a player like Southwood going out of the door, who is someone who picks up a lot of criticism, will naturally just kind of boost the feeling with the fan base. If you have less people around that they're kind of not keen on, it's going to naturally just kind of give that little bit of a lift. So I think, just like I said, for everyone, this is kind of the best case scenario that could have come of this.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. For us, we're getting the player off the wage bill, like you said, with the fans, who we're probably one of the biggest Southwood defenders, 2 of the biggest Southwood defenders in the fan base. And, even we're not particularly that bothered to see him go because of the situation with Brad and everything. And, it makes sense for Southwood. He gets to play more football. Like I said, we've got $5,000 a week now that we're not paying. So yeah, it is just a good move all round. And we seem to have picked up a relatively decent number 2 who can come in if Brad's out. Obviously, he's not on international duty, so that's not an issue anymore. Obviously, it was with Southwood earlier on in the last season. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's just good business all round. I think it's sensible business, I would say. It's just sensible, makes sense for everyone.
Yeah, and even if Binns isn't someone that ends up becoming like a number 1 for us, these are the way that football clubs operate nowadays. You get someone in early, it's very low risk. You're probably going to be able to turn them over. It's never gonna be like a dangerous one. So it's always worth giving a go to. And clearly, like we've said, we're giving a go to someone who there is at least a level of trust in, which I think all round, yeah, is just a good bit of business.
Yeah, I agree. I would say, to be fair, your point about it being a very low risk transfer, a number 2 goalkeeper is probably one of the lowest risk transfers in football, because you bring someone in who you're not expecting to play much anyway. And best case scenario, they're absolutely fantastic. They take that number 1 spot and they improve what you already have in that goalkeeping department, which you could say is probably what happened with Brad. And if it doesn't work out, then they're quite easy to turn over, like you said, and there's plenty of other options you can pick up. So, like you said, I think it's a very low risk transfer, and it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's the goalkeeper situation then. 1 incoming, 1 outgoing. I just want to touch quickly on one of the outfield outgoings that we've had, Josh McEachran leaving the club. I think this was another one that you can kind of see where it's come from. We weren't 100% sure if it was going to happen, but I think it's sensible business.
Yeah, it was a shame because the injury killed him. I think he was one of the brightest sparks in the earlier stages of the season, but you could tell once he had like that kind of decently long layoff, once he came back, he just wasn't the same player. He really struggled to get going, and obviously we as a whole prospect got a lot better, and he struggled to keep up with that. So I don't think anyone can have any complaints there.
No. No, I definitely agree. I agree with you. The fact that I think the injury killed him a little bit. I don't think he was absolutely fantastic before. I think he was steady, I think was how I describe him at his peak for Rovers. But when, the injury happened and then coming back into the team when we were playing so well in the second half of the season, he did stand out a little bit, and to be honest, not in a good way. So I think it's difficult to tell how he could have kicked on this season, but I think you can only base it off of what you've seen, previously. And I think overall we strengthened in the midfield. And is there a spot for Josh? Maybe, but probably not. And I think this is another one where Steve's thinking he's probably not in my plans. He might be in my plans, but I could probably do without him. And, he's off the wage bill now. Which I think that's something we want to have good money to get some good signings in. And that is a thing you have to do, is balance the books. If you want to bring in, improvements, you do need to balance the books sometimes. And I think that is kind of what we've done with Josh, is a bit of book balancing.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know how much he was on kind of financially, but he is kind of, in terms of his whole career, he is somebody who's got a little bit of a bigger name than you'd say for the rest of our squad. So there is a good chance he was on what would have been a half decent amount. So yeah, again, all round, I don't think there's really any complaints you can draw. I don't think anyone's going to be devastated to see him go. I don't think he's going to be devastated to see his way off. I don't think the club are going to be devastated to see him on his way. I think it's, again, best case scenario for all involved.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I used this word already to talk about the goalkeeper situation, but sensible business. I think that's all it is, really.
Yeah, I think that's what the whole window's been, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I know we'll probably have a little bit more of a touch on the whole window when we go into the season, but I think all round it's just been it's not been the most exciting window we've ever seen, but it's all just been very steady.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what it's been. Steady. Like you said, I'm saying not impressive in the way as like, oh my God, wow, some of the people that we're signing, but impressive in the sort of squad building that we're doing, if you get what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. Like, impressive in a different way. You can have windows that are impressive with the players that you bring in because they're such wow factor, and they're great individuals. And I'm not saying that our players that we've brought in aren't great individuals. What I'm saying is we've definitely built a squad more around the system than the individuals. And that's why I say it's impressive in that way, and not the sort of wow factor that you can get with some transfer windows. But that doesn't change what I think about the window. I think it's been a very solid one.
Yeah, there's been, I think the best way to sum it up is there's been an idea behind every single player that's come in and gone out.
Yeah.
There hasn't really felt there's been any wasted business, if that makes sense.
No, I 100% agree. I think there's been a very clear intent, clear plan on what we want to build, and we've gone around doing that very well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that,
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's the sort of, we've done the goalkeeper situation, the sort of, small little outgoings here and there that have happened. Now we're going to move on. We're going to touch on our first competitive game of the 2026-27 season, Carabao Cup. I don't know why they decided to do it this year. The League Cup starting a week before the season, so on a Saturday. I think this is the first time it's ever happened. But it's same old Bristol Rovers in the Carabao Cup. 1-0 defeat against Peterborough United. What a shock we don't score. Tom Nichols is still the last person to score in the Carabao Cup for Bristol Rovers. Just let that sink in. Overall, I think it was just one of those, wasn't it? I thought there were positives, but we just didn't show enough.
No, yeah, I think that is kind of the greatest way to sum it up. I mean, I kind of, if I'm going to look at an area where it went wrong, as much as I'm not going to make this a big issue because obviously we know how well he's done for us, but I don't think Steve got it right at all, particularly with the front line. I think kind of our biggest issue in the first half was Quigley was playing up front on his own and everything was being played to him. He was doing his job. He was finding flick-ons with no one to play it to because he had no one alongside him. And then we had probably our brightest spark of our brightest moments of the game came when Caven came on and they were playing as a two. And then very quickly, Quigley got brought off for Rikes. And we had kind of this this quick, nimble, get the ball to their feet front two. And we didn't get the ball to their feet once. Everything was as if Quigley was still on the pitch.
Yeah, I was about to say that. When it was Caven and Rikes, obviously you want us to play along the floor because that's how they're best. They're short, like you said, quick, nimble. It makes sense. And we were still playing like Quigley was on the pitch. And I think that was our biggest problem, especially considering we were chasing the game and we needed to find that goal. And I think that can sometimes have an impact, when you're chasing a game, it just makes everything harder, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, and you get those little moments of desperation, which you did almost feel like at times we were trying to force it a little bit too much.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think defensively, to be honest, I don't think we looked too bad. I know, obviously, we ended up losing the game, conceding the goal, but really, that was just, straight. Do I say idiocy from the ref? I don't think it was a handball at all. I've seen it back.
Yeah, I've seen it back a lot. I've watched just about every single replay I can and about every single speed I can, and I'm still not convinced he touches it.
No,
I've tried to look at it from the perspective of he has touched it to see if kind of changed the way I look at it, see if it changed anything, but I can't see it.
No, I've seen the replays back, and it looks like it just glances not over his hand. That's making me sound like I'm saying he glanced his hand. No, I think it went just over, and I think I can see maybe why the ref gave it because his hand is high and close to the ball. So maybe it's one of those where he's just had a bad view of it and he's thought it hit the hand, but really as a, they're semi-pro refs, but as a ref, refereeing a professional game, you really need to be able to see that. And I think that was the complete wrong decision. And obviously, if it was the wrong decision, it's a decision that's cost us the game.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those. Obviously, if it's touched his hand, it's a penalty.
Yeah.
I think kind of what's probably deceived him is it looks like the cross has come in and the cross has lost a lot of pace in the air. It's coming very slow and you can see it die. And by the time it hits the ground, it's kind of lost all pace on the ball, which I think has maybe made the ref think that it's taken the touch, which has killed the ball.
Yeah.
But that was almost what got me when I first saw it back. But then I've gone and I've looked for the contacts and I'm still yet to see it. So I can understand why. I'm not going to act like it's kind of a howler as much as I did at the time, but I still do disagree with it.
Yeah, I think you can understand where he's coming from. It's just annoying when it's cost you the game. This is what I was saying, because I don't think, other than that, I don't think we played that bad defensively. I think that was our best aspect. I mean, Peterborough didn't seem to offer much, but I think we dealt with what they threw at us relatively well, obviously other than the penalty, but you can't do much against the penalty. I think that was our best, that was the biggest positive, was the defensive work.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Because I actually thought in the early stages it was looking just that little bit shaky. I think there was a couple of times where chances didn't really come of it, but we were inviting pressure onto ourselves through just these little sloppy moments, which kind of made me a bit worried. But in that second half, as much as they didn't need to offer us much, they still tried to push forward, and they didn't really offer us much outside of these one or two moments from individuals, particularly their left winger. I think it was Edwards.
I can't remember, to be honest.
But there were a couple times where he kind of had us on ropes a little bit. But outside of that, there's only really 2 chances from open play I can think of them creating. One in the first half and then one right near the end.
Yeah.
I don't think that's anything to worry about.
No, not at all. It was just one of those. It was a pretty poor game all round in terms of chance creation. We didn't offer much, obviously, because seemed to be quite adamant on playing hoofball. Peterborough didn't offer much. It was a game for the defences, and it was just one moment. Unfortunately for us, we were on the wrong side of it, and that's why we've gone out.
Yeah, but it's on another day. I know that's the worst phrase to say in football. You feel like you're saying it all the time, but on another day, we take that. We had our chances. We probably had the bulk of the chances. We had a huge one right at the end with Rikes.
Yeah.
We should be coming out of that game having at least scored a goal. But
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world. Like you said, we're accustomed to this. We're accustomed to going out. I do actually prefer this schedule because at least now it's not something we even have to consider for the season now. It's just gone.
That is a good point. Yeah.
Our opening day curse, hopefully it's been taken up by this, since this was technically the opening day.
That's the one thing that I would like is that hopefully, technically opening day was the League Cup. Whether they're separate things, it remains to be seen. But hopefully they're one and the same this season, because that would be nice. Yeah, I think it's just one of them. Like you said, it's not ideal. Obviously, we want to get our season off to the best start we can, obviously. But I think there's much worse outcomes that could have come out of that game. And I think, we got to see some of the new players in action. So I think that's all you can really ask for other than the result, which unfortunately just didn't happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to touch on those two specifically, since we haven't actually spoken about them yet. Specifically, the two in the middle that came on, I think, should be touched on, being Russell Denny and Keelan Goff.
Yes,
what
we were going to get onto that.
If you wanted to kind of take the floor there.
Should we? Right, who are we going to start with? Should we start with Russell Denny, considering he's sort of
I think he has probably less to talk about. If I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I would agree somewhat. I thought you could see what he's about. I think the problem was it was not really his sort of game. I think we got bypassed quite a lot. When he got on the ball, he seemed to be quite willing to take people on. He was, getting the crowd wrapped up a bit. They were quite well with some of the skill he was pulling out. But like you said, I think it was just not really his game. I think we were still too adamant on playing forward through the lines that he couldn't get on the ball too much.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up best. He had little to work with. A lot of the game was straight over his head the other way. He was being forced into a game he probably didn't want to play. The little moments we saw were positive, but they were little moments. It was very few and far between through no fault of his own. It just wasn't kind of
his game,
what you want for a debut for a player of his profile.
Yeah, he wasn't in the game, and it wasn't his fault. It was just one of those. He would like to have probably played in a different game, but such is football sometimes. You can definitely see some positives in there. I think we'll have to see more of him to really truly make up our mind. But I think you can see maybe a few little sparks of why the Spurs fans rate him so highly. I mean, if he's anything like our last Spurs loanee, then we should be in for a treat. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one. Hopefully, we play a little bit differently against York, and he can get into the game a little bit more. We'll touch on that in a bit. But yeah, it was just not really his afternoon, and like you said, through no fault of his own. But he just wasn't in the game.
Yeah, and I'd expect it to against York, because it's going to be a completely different atmosphere. It's going to be, obviously, we're going to their ground. They're going to be well up for it. Obviously, as much as things have gone down on their side of things, which we'll touch on, they're still going to be, you'd like to think, in decently high spirits. They're going to be up for it. And that will probably bring about a bit more of a game that will suit him. Something that's a bit higher energy. And it feels weird to say when we were playing against a team that are in the league above, but probably a bit more technical as well.
Yeah. No, you make a good point. It wasn't the most technical, most spectacular games to watch. And I would expect, I mean, I haven't seen York yet under Scott Lindsay. With all the stuff that happened, that could make his own podcast episode if we somehow branched into EFL. But Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that game goes. And hopefully, like you said, we can get a bit more gauge as to what he can do if he can get into the game a bit more.
Yeah, yeah, no, hopefully so. And yeah, you'd like to think so.
Yeah. And then we'll touch now on the other transfer, Keenan Goff, of course, from Charlton. What were your thoughts on him? I don't think you particularly were that impressed, to be honest.
Again, I wasn't particularly impressed, but again, I don't know how much of his fault it was. I don't think it's the kind of game you want to be dropped in on for a player of kind of his ability, because he is obviously he's coming here to play as a midfielder, but he is naturally more defensive minded. He's played as a centre back, and he
Yeah.
was coming into a situation where we needed him to contribute primarily going forwards. And the little bits of defensive work he did, I did think were good. He was breaking up the play well, but on the ball, obviously very early days. But I wasn't particularly the biggest fan. I thought he was quite wasteful at times. I think there were a couple bits that were a bit panicked, a little bit rushed, a little bit sloppy, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, I would agree. I think pretty much you've summed it up well to a T. I thought the defensive work that he did was pretty good. I thought he was, like you said, breaking up the play quite well. He was a little bit of cover for that defensive line. Not that they needed much of it, but he did that job well. But I think when he got on the ball, he was a bit rushed. Quite a few misplaced passes. It wasn't the best, technically from him, if that makes sense. But again, early days, and did he have about 25 minutes? He didn't have much time. Um, they both didn't really. So I think it's too early days to say. I mean, it's not the best debut in the world, but then neither was it for Reece either. So I think it's one of those that we'll have to see as the season progresses. Of course, we've heard really good things from Charlton fans. So if he can live up to them, then I don't think we've got much to worry about. I just think it was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yeah, and there were probably aspects of his game that you don't really pick up on, because something that we kind of highlighted as an issue before he came on was that we were getting overran in midfield quite a
Yeah.
lot, and that was something that stopped when he came on. And I didn't notice it being directly because of him, but that may just be like a situation where, with his presence on the pitch, the openings didn't really come, and it's the kind of thing you don't really pick up on when you're in the ground watching the game.
Especially with that point, especially because he was sitting sort of just in front of the defence. You could give us that little sort of extra presence in the midfield, and obviously you've been overrun. You've not got bodies in there, have you? So if he can be that sort of extra line in midfield, that can sort of maybe make the battle a bit more even in the midfield. And then obviously, like I said, he's got that little bit of buffer that he can give the defence. I think that could be a good role for us. And I think that's probably the role that he might play most often. I know he was pushed forward a little bit more on Saturday, but I can see him sort of settling into that role as the weeks and months progress.
Yeah, and again, back in the situation of the Peterborough game, it was probably like a little bit of, I don't really know what's got, like a deterrent in a way. Just his kind of presence is something that's going to naturally change Peterborough's approach when it comes to build up. They're not going to find it as easy to kind of play through the middle of us just because of him being there. I'm not going to act like I was paying attention to these things. Like when I'm in the ground, I'm not watching the off the ball movement of our holding midfielder and how it affects their front line.
No, we don't have the most tactical discussions in the ground, do we? But
with all due respect, if that's what you're going to a football game to do and you're not being paid for it, then fair enough. But I don't do that.
there's dedication, there's that. But
yeah. But no, I think we saw, even if the performances weren't necessarily the best, I think we can get a bit of an idea of what these kind of players are going to be and what kind of role they're going to suit for us from just these little moments.
Yeah. And I think it was the point that I was making. It was a tough introduction with the context of the game, how it was being played, how we were playing specifically, and the roles that they play. They weren't really suited for the game. We've already touched on Reece, of course. He was just, completely bypassed both ways. Peterborough started going a bit long towards the end, didn't they? And then we were going long, forward. So I would like to see a touchback because it probably wasn't that extensive. And then with Keenan, it was just one of those.
Yeah, sorry, fly in my face. Yeah, it was. And to be fair, even the little bits where we did kind of get the ball on the floor a bit more, particularly for Reece, he was being stitched up a few times. There were a couple of hospital passes that came into him. I think it's one of those we have to just kind of look at it and disregard it, both in terms of the overall performance for our season and in terms of the individuals. Because I came out of the game thinking that one of like something that was a little bit of a concern that was that there were no like standout impressive showings.
Yeah.
But then as time's gone on, you kind of think like, is that much of it? Is it a big deal? Probably not. Can we see it as a big deal where things don't work out? Yes, but right now, is it something we should be kind of hanging our hats on? No.
No, not overly. And I think you can also make the argument that there were no standout performances across the pitch. Like no one looked particularly good, like for either side. And I think that sort of, while obviously it's something that you hope is not a reoccurring theme, you know, it was just one of those games where no one really stood out. So Peterborough could maybe, I know they won, so it's sort of papers over the cracks a little bit of that. But that's another concern they can have, that they didn't really have any proper standout performances either, with the exception of maybe that winger. But even then, he didn't particularly get into the games too much. I thought it was just one of those games, really, in terms of there was no real proper shining light. You know, for neutral, it was probably a pretty poor game to watch as a neutral, if for whatever reason anyone was watching it as a neutral.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'd agree with that. It was, I think on their end, yeah, they probably do have some concerns to take that because they're expected to be in like a little bit of a dogfight this season, and we weren't particularly on it, and yet they still were kind of
Pushed.
pushed and also like a bit inoffensive. They didn't really, they were kind of just there for the ride, which obviously if they care about the result that much, that doesn't really matter. But in a game like this, you probably do want to see a little bit more on their end. You want to kind of get some positive signs to take forward. But for us, I think it is the kind of thing that we can just almost completely disregard, provided that we go on and turn it around and pick up and kick on straight away.
Yeah, it's one of those where there's lessons to take from it. And I think that's what we have to do is, it's not a great result, but there's lessons. We can take them, implement them. Things should turn around. I mean, it's one of those, we said this at the start of last season, so we don't want to, completely write off the fact that we lost this game. It was like, oh, who cares? Blah, 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 blah. It's not great, but I think that like you said, there's positives, and we've just got to take them, work on the negatives, and then go into York, and hopefully things will iron themselves out, and we can just push on from there. And it's one less competition to worry about now. So I mean, I'm not particularly that bothered about the League Cup. It's much more important to me than the league trophy. But if there's one competition other than the league that I want us to do well in, it's the FA Cup. So League Cup, exactly. One of them.
It's a with a fear of sounding better because we lost. It's a higher intensity preseason game, and all you really want to take for it are some kind of like blueprints to take forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite call it a preseason game. I get where you're coming from. I think it's like one of those that you just don't take as seriously. And I know that makes me sound a bit hypocritical, say, well, it's not a preseason game, you don't take it serious. You get what I mean? There's some competitive games that you go into, well, obviously you want to win them. They're not sort of like the be all and end all of your week. Like the league games are. Like, it'll be miserable on Saturday if I'm coming back from York after we've been turned over. So, but I wasn't like, it didn't ruin my night. That's what I'm saying. Obviously, I wanted to, and I'm like, with pre-season, it's just one of those. I'm just there to watch the football and have a good time. But obviously, I wanted us to win, but it's not the be all and end all, especially in a competition like the League Cup.
Yeah, I think that was what I was trying to get out more. It's not something you need to concern yourself about as much as you want to win. It's not a result that you're going to pay really much attention to now or at any point. It's a high intensity game that serves as a bit of a warm up for the bits that you're going to care about.
Yeah, it's a starter in a way. If you're at a restaurant analogy, York on Saturday is the main course and Peterborough is the starter.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah. Well, should we get on to York then? We've given Peterborough our due attention, and obviously the league season is starting in just 2 days' time. I can't believe it's already 2 days until the league season starts. Of course, as you all know by now, our first league game of the 2026-27 season, there we are, finally get my English out correctly, is against York City away. And our first visit, well, it'll be our first visit to York's new ground, won't it? I think the last time that we played York was in 2016 and it was at their old ground. So
yes,
I
yeah,
believe,
yeah.
I believe this should be our first ever visit to York's new ground.
Yeah, I think it is. I can't think of any others. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. Obviously, as well, quite a big game for York. Their first game back in the Football League for, I believe, 11 years.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a massive game for them, of course. We all know what happened last season. They were absolutely fantastic in the National League. What a thrilling promotion battle it was between them and Rochdale, of course, in the end. That 1-1 draw on the final day against Rochdale was enough to see them win the league on 108 points. And I tell you what, coming into this game, until maybe 2 weeks ago, I was scared about this. Obviously, they had a fantastic National League campaign, and they probably wouldn't have looked out of place in League Two last season. I think they probably would have come mid-table solidly, to be honest.
Yeah.
They had a fantastic gaffer in Stuart Maynard. Everything. They had a very good transfer window from what I know. I haven't been keeping up too much with transfer windows other than Rovers, but from what I've seen, there was a lot of talk about York being up that end come the end of this season. And then things have just all fallen apart over there because the owners seem to have had a stroke, really, and decided to sack Stuart Maynard for absolutely no reason. And things just seem to have self-destructed from there. Of course, they've appointed Scott Lindsay, who his stock has fallen a lot since he got Crawley promoted. And I think, to be honest, I don't think that's a great appointment whatsoever from them. And they went out in the preliminary round of the Carabao Cup. So we went out in round one and we still got further than they did.
It was to Crawley as well, wasn't it?
It was to Crawley as well, which is kind of even funnier part. And from what I remember, the York fans were singing to Lindsay, sacked in the morning, after the game. It's probably a bit of a joke because of what happened with Maynard, and it seems their owner's a bit trigger happy, but it's not a good first impression. And I've seen a lot of self-destructive interviews from Lindsay since then, and it was probably just a fan, one of those bollocks news accounts. But I saw one tweet, and it probably was just one tweet, but I think it sums up the situation at York right now, that was saying that they were already considering sacking Lindsay. Now, I don't buy that, but with the way that York are being run right now, if it came out tomorrow that Lindsay was going to get sacked, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me when you're willing to sack a manager that's just got you promoted because of a quote unquote disagreement in vision, that it takes you until 2 weeks before the season to figure out that you have that disagreement. Then what can't you do? Where is the line of realism when it comes to letting people go? Because everything was geared up for York prior to kind of Salford really kicking into gear in the transfer market. I think most people probably had us and York as two of the very, very standouts, and this was going to be a massive, massive game. I mean, it's been picked for TV coverage, and obviously that's because of York, the story they had last season, getting back to the Football League. But I imagine a big part of that was because this was going to be seen as a game that is really like an early season definer for two sides with similar visions. And I mean, we can't say for certain that they're going to be out of it, but the likelihood is now that in one appointment, York's aims for the season have absolutely plummeted.
Absolutely. I think their season expectations have completely turned around off the basis of one decision. And I think they'll be fine. This is not me saying, they're going to go straight back down, all of this. Teams never do. I think this is one of the most said stats in football. So it's flogging a dead horse, but no team that has been promoted from the National League has ever come straight back down. And I don't see that changing this season. But York have gone from one of my favourites to get promoted again to mid-table at best.
Yeah, well, I did all of my predictions yesterday, and I can't remember where it was I put York, but I think it was in that kind of 11th to 13th region when I was planning to have them right in the mix with us. And it's a weird one because their squad hasn't particularly got any better since they got promoted because it didn't really need to. They had the
No.
momentum, they had everything kind of set in place, and then that all dies in an instant when you take out the man in the middle who was making that all happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, especially for York. They seem to be, obviously they've got a very good squad, but the connection that they seem to have with Maynard sort of was, felt a bit like the super glue that held everything together. York had all the pieces, and Maynard was the super glue, and they've brought a sledgehammer right into that super glue, and everything's fallen apart. And Lindsay is come in, and he seems like he's just going to be a cheap PVA you'd find in a year 5 classroom that's going to lose its stick after about 2 months.
Yeah, and the stick's covered in all the dry glue, and it's absolutely filthy.
Yep.
One of them.
What an analogy that is.
She's giving you
And
some
people
great
say you don't
flashbacks.
get content with this. Honestly.
You don't get this on Sky, trust me.
No, you don't.
But yeah, no, it feels like kind of the three parts that you rely on the most at a football club. Very simply, you got the players, you got the coach, you got the fans. They had a clearly very capable group of players. They had an amazing coach, and they had a fan base that was right behind them. And in one decision, they've lost that amazing coach, and they've lost a lot of that fan base being right behind them. They've lost a lot of the trust. They've lost what was such a great connection from coach to fans there. So I mean, I know we've kind of got a bit sidetracked here from talking about the game, and we've gone on to them as a whole. But I think particularly in the early stages, they are going to really suffer from it, which is only going to be to our benefit.
Yeah, but I think the reason we have talked about all this context surrounding the game is because it is very important to us. Obviously, the fact that, like you said, it's probably going to really affect them in the first couple of months of the season. And by pure coincidence from the fixture gods, we get to play them first. So we're the first team that get to reap the benefits of everything that is falling apart over there. And we've got to take that chance and grab it with both hands while we've got it.
Yeah, and I think a big thing as well is as much the atmosphere I'm imagining is still going to be very good on Saturday, but York's ground would have been a real test for us to manage that atmosphere with the spirits they were in. That would have been essentially like a 12th man for them. And now, like you said, in these early stages, while they haven't kind of Lindsay could well turn this around, he could send them on a good run and he can win that trust back. But in these early stages, naturally there's going to be a lot of distrust there, and it's not going to be a case where, say, we go 1-0 up. York's fans, they're probably not going to be in the spirit that they would have been with Maynard in charge, which is all right, come on, let's get back into this. We've done this before. It's now going to be oh God, it's all going wrong. It's all crumbling apart. And
Yeah.
I think that can become very apparent. If we kind of pounce, I think we can really kind of push the misery on them from an early point there.
Well, I think that's something we've seen with us last season. You made the point where if it goes sort of well for us and we go 1-0 up, maybe even 2-0 up early on, they will have the sense of dread because they've seen it's already started to go wrong with the preliminary round of the Carabao Cup. They'll be thinking, my goodness, this is falling apart here. We're absolutely screwed. There's no hope. And we could just run riot. And that's what happened last year. When we were on that losing run, you knew the moment we conceded a goal, that was it. Because there was no hope. The fans were deflated. They had nothing to get behind from the lads. And so every time we went behind, you had that sense of dread. Oh my God, this is it. This is over because there's no way we are getting back into this game. And then we've seen the other side of it, which is probably what York would have been like. Obviously, in the second half of the season, where even in games where we went behind, we knew we had the quality to get back into the game. The fans were behind the players, and so it was sort of the double-edged sword of the players had the ability to get back into games, the fans had the belief, and that could spur the players on. So it works in both ways, and I feel like that could be a sort of thing. Obviously, we haven't got the biggest allocation, but I feel like we've got that confidence in us where if it goes 1-0 to York, we know we could probably turn it around. Whereas if we can get into the game early on, York's mindset at the moment is probably one of defeatist mentality. And obviously that's because of all what's happened over the last couple of weeks. But we could really press the knife in. That's what if we can get a couple of goals, because we've got the confidence that we can win the game through adversity anyway. So if it's all sunshine and rainbows from the start, with you couple in that all the York fans will probably be depressed, it could be a perfect storm.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously the challenge for us now is capitalizing on that. Like you said, we need to get into the game early. And that's going to be probably the biggest test, is because we have been more of a second half team under Evans.
Yeah.
So we are going to need to kind of step outside of our comfort zone a little bit. We are going to need to really take it to them from the off. But it is a case, if we can get it right, things can fall into our hands very, very easily. And at York as a group, I do trust to be able to steady the ship. But these things take time, and we've seen it as much as anyone. These things do take time. When you're in a rut, it takes, obviously, I know it's not a rut in terms of on the pitch yet because they've not played yet, but things are falling apart from the inside, and it can take a while to rebuild that. And we've got the opportunity where it feels weird to say it right at the very beginning, but we're playing them at the perfect time. And we
really are. It's not, I mean, it's not weird to say that, because while it's not, no football has been played yet other than the Carabao Cup, but it's things are falling apart, and we are playing them at the perfect time because all the stuff has fallen apart before the season. So we get to reap, well, we have to take the chance, obviously, but if we can, we get to reap the rewards of all that's fallen apart at York right from the off. And like you said, they could go into a rut, but they could recover from it. And obviously, I can't remember when we're playing them at home, but they could be out of that rut by then, and then it's a much harder game. So we don't know what will happen with York, past October, November. It's too, early to say what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen at Rovers past November, December. But we know now that they're in a very precarious situation that we can take advantage of, and that's exactly what we need to do.
And it's crazy as well how much of the narrative has flipped, because that is kind of gone from, we were playing them at probably the worst time we could have possibly played them, to now being the best, because we were originally scheduled to play them at a time where what was freshest in their memory was the incredible promotion story.
Yeah.
And as much as on the pitch that's still the case, now what's going to be freshest in their mind is all the administrative stuff, everything that's gone on behind the scenes, which you never want to be playing on your mind as a fan. You want to be able to solely focus on what's going on the pitch, and that's not been possible for them. So it's a case of the prey is there. We need to be the predator now.
Yeah, absolutely. And should we talk about sort of setup now then? Because we've waffled on quite a lot about the actual situation behind York and everything, and it is important to talk about. But I feel like it's going to end up just being talking about how we can take advantage of York's struggles. We actually need to talk about how we're going to play, and I think solid defense. I think if we just keep that pretty similar to how we played against Peterborough. Of course, we did concede, but it was unlucky with the penalty. And then we just need to, I think, try and keep it on the deck a bit more. And I think that comes from the back line. I think that was their biggest problem, was they were so insistent on trying to hoof it long. If they can, get it moving along the deck, we can get Russell Denny involved. I think he could make an impact and try and win that midfield battle. I think Russell Denny being there would help that. Obviously, we get to. I don't know particularly too much about how Lindsay sets up. I don't know if you watched their game in the Carabao Cup.
I didn't know.
No, so I'm not particularly too familiar with Lindsay's tactical setup. So it'd be interesting to see how he plays. I thought if Maynard was in charge, it would have been quite a technical game for both sides. But it'd be interesting to see how Lindsay lines up, because I think we'll want to play technical. It's just whether we'll have to adapt it somewhat to deal with if York have, completely switched their style and they're playing long ball now.
Yeah, and also just in terms of like the general shape, because Maynard was known for a 5-back, was he not?
Oh,
And
I don't know the specific. Wouldn't surprise me.
I believe it was. I think I remember their left side being Kitching and Ben Brooks, with Brooks pushing on more. I feel like I remember them being more of a 5-back team, and I don't know what it is that Lindsay's doing, but there is a good chance that's changed. Which, again, with how successful they were, you don't want to be making these changes. But it is going to be, even if it is a worsening for them, it's a new challenge for us. And in terms of our setup, I'm kind of in a place now where I feel like what I want and what I think we're going to get is kind of different.
Yeah.
I was having this discussion earlier, actually, in terms of our shape. It feels very much like we're pushing onto the side of what we did against Peterborough in the early stages, which was the 4-2-3-1, very conventional. We're looking to play with wingers, which I don't know about you, but I'm personally not particularly a fan of.
I think the problem is I think we're still a winger or two short. I think it could work, but I think we've not quite got enough strength and depth in terms of wingers for it to work at the moment. I can see why he's going for it, but I think we just don't have the strength and depth right now.
Yeah, well, I touched on the issue with the strikers. I think we work better when we've got two up top. But
Yeah.
additionally, on top of that, sorry, my voice is going. Additionally, on top of that, I feel like when we play with wingers, we almost become too over reliant on the width.
Yeah.
And something I noticed in that Peterborough game was absolutely everything
was going down.
wide
It was going down
when
the
we had the
channels.
ball on the floor. And what I prefer the system that we've been playing for a lot of pre-season, which is the 4-3-1-2, a lot more narrow, because with the players that we've got, you think Caven, you think Ford, you think Lee, and then also the fullbacks, Maka, Sparks if he's fit. They can all, even though the first three that I mentioned are all central players, they can all drift, and the fullbacks are very aggressive. I think you get that width anyway, and I think that is, even if you're sacrificing the wingers, I don't think you're actually losing much in terms of the width, but you're getting so much more through the middle.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We've got players that, while they're central in their positions, on paper they can drift out wide, and I think that's good for us. We can have a good balance. I think obviously the width is important, but I think that was our biggest problem against Peterborough, was we were losing the midfield battle for probably a solid 75 minutes. You could argue for longer, and it's very over talked about, the midfield battle, but I think rightfully so, because it is such an important aspect of football these days. Like, if you control the midfield, probably a good 80% of games you're going to win. So we need to do that on Saturday, and I think that is why I'd agree with you. If we can have as many players who, while they've got the talent, to get down the wing, drift past players, get crosses in, get chances in and stuff, we need enough in there that we can win the midfield battle and take it from there. And if we have that over-reliance on wingers, that's also a problem, because then they're not used to drifting into the middle, and it makes it much more likely we're going to lose the midfield battle, and then we're up against it.
Yeah, and I really like the kind of, in terms of the individuals, a midfielder, Russell Denny, I want to come in eventually, but in terms of what we're kind of reliant on now, what we're used to, a midfield three of Mola, Smallwood, and Tommy Lee dropping deeper, I think you've got everything you need there. You've got your engine, you've got your kind of your steady, your controller, and you've got your playmaker all there.
Yeah.
And then you can get the energy going into the 10 with a Shaq Ford dropping in there, or an Aitchison, who are going to be more of your runners, your technical, make something happen. I think we've got the players for a really good system there. And I feel like we are kind of wasted until we get the better personnel out wide playing the 4-2-3-1. Because, as well, like you said, in terms of the midfield battle, the wingers we have are sticking wide, and we are losing a body in the middle of the pitch. And we felt the impact of that. Peterborough as well, in particular. I believe it was their right back, their number 2, was dropping into the midfield every time they were on the ball. So they were getting another man in there that we weren't matching, and we were just getting completely overrun, which can continue into the season. So I much prefer having that extra body in there.
Yeah, that is very true. Obviously, with the problem with we've got some good wingers, but we just don't have enough of them. And I think that's the case of, if we then play with that system, we then lose a man in the midfield, like you said, and it just makes it all harder. So I think if we play a bit more narrow, I think that suits us, our strengths well. And we've got players who are comfortable with playing on the ball and through the lines in the middle. And I think that is probably one of our biggest strengths. Is, you could argue we've probably got some of the best, ball playing centre midfielders that are willing to do it as well, in
Yeah.
the league. And I think that would be one of our biggest strengths and one of our best ways of getting results. And I think that's why we do need to utilise it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that strength is a lot bigger than the strength we have out wide right now. And I think in these early stages, we should play to what suits us best, not necessarily what we want to do, but what we have in front of us.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think that was probably one of the best parts of Steve in the second half of last season, was that he was quite good at just playing to our strengths and what we could do rather than what he wanted to do. And obviously, I know he's had a summer to sort of assemble his squad, but I'm hoping he doesn't lose that of sort of that tactical versatility of knowing what is right at that present moment with the personnel that we have at hand. Um, and just to put the best system out on the pitch that can win that specific game. I
Yeah,
think that's
well,
his best.
I was going to say, I think he's shown he is willing to do that, because as much as I did think in the end he got it wrong with the personnel we had on the pitch, he did make the switch from 1 up top to 2 up top against Peterborough. So already early on, he's shown he is willing to make that tweak if he can see it's not working, which is something that he got a lot of credit for. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, I just want to see it consistently applied over the course of the season. I think it will do. I think he's a very good tactical manager. Obviously, you've got to be good at tactics to be a manager, obviously, but there's levels to it. There's a lot of tactically one-dimensional managers in football, and that's what I mean. That Steve is quite good at, just identifying those little nitpicky bits that need to be tweaked, and I think that'll stand us in good stead.
You get a lot of stubbornness at the top, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
something he's really shown, which might actually come as a bit of a surprise when you see kind of the person that he is. He can be a very poor personality, and they can tend to be the more stubborn ones. But in terms of how he manages games, he's very willing to kind of go against what he thinks to do what's right, which, as much as it sounds simple, a lot of managers don't do.
I think he's got a win at all costs mentality, and obviously every manager wants to win games, but there's some managers that will be like, well, if we lose, we play my system. Oh well, my system is the best system, and you can all shove it. Whereas Steve's got that sort of, we win at all costs. If I have to, slightly change my tactics, change my morals, then so be it for the cause. And I think that's probably one of his best traits.
Yeah, no, 100%, definitely.
So overall, I think as long as we keep it on the deck, win that midfield battle, we can play a bit more narrow than we did on Saturday. I think that would be good. I agree with you on that point. I think we should be fine if we can get into the lead early on, deflate that home crowd as much as possible, because they're not going to be up for it as much as they would have been anyway from the off with all that's happened. And I think it'll be a lot easier to get into their heads and just deflate the whole place if we can get in front early on. I think that's what we need to try and do. But I still do think we've got the quality to come from behind if we have to. I don't want us to rely on that, but it's something. I think the only thing that worries me, and I know it's the most cliche thing ever, but we've got to talk about it, is the opening day record. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
I believe it's 1 win in 15 now.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's whether we can overcome that, and it sounds so silly, but sometimes I do believe it is a real thing because of just how often, we lose games, even like ones that look like they should be easy, like Harrogate last season, Forest Green in League One. Like those games we should be winning,
Yeah.
and we just can't for whatever reason. So it's something we need to overcome. I don't think you can look too much into it, though, can you? Maybe.
It's one of those things. You're like with the Carabao Cup and how we've got on there. There's no consistency to it, but you're always going to believe there is.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think it's just something that might play at the back of our minds. That's all would say in that regard. But I think we've just got to go out and play our own game, and we'll see what happens from now. I'm confident, to be honest, with all that's happened at York. I know we've banged on about it, but I think it is important because of when we're playing them and what has happened. It's just so falling apart there, and I think we can take advantage of that. I think if we can get out the traps early, I said it, I think we should be fine, and I think we will be fine. I'm going to go for 2-0. I'm going to go for that. I'm confident.
Yeah, it strikes me as very much either a 0-0 or a 2-3-0 kind of game.
Yeah.
And I'm going to match you. I'm also going to go 2-0. That's the way I'm leaning. I think we are going to get out of the traps early enough, and then I think it's just going to be steady.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're confident enough about that then. That's a good note for us to end off on then, I suppose. Thank you, everyone, once again for watching or listening to this episode. Of course, we'll be back to weekly uploads now that the season is back full and proper. Thank you once again, Jaimie, for joining me, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
And once again, to the listeners or watchers, if you're on YouTube, thank you for joining us.